Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be going over how to analyze a transcript using SALT software, specifically using the database menu. So let's go ahead and open and sample. This one comes with the software, so if you go to open transcript samples and then analysis practice, you can find it if you want to work alongside. We're going to be working with Albany, a porcupine named Fluffy. So here's our transcript. You can see in the header, there's the plus line with the name, age, grade, and so forth. And then this is a narrative story retell of a porcupine named Fluffy. And then down below is kind of the body of the transcript. So working from the database menu, what that means is that you are going to be selecting samples from the SALT reference database to compare your transcript to. So that's the first step, is to select the database samples. A lot of this imports from your header, so you can take the defaults. So this already pulled narrative story retell, and the subgroup is a porcupine named Fluffy. If you were doing a different story, it would already import that. And I'm going to go ahead and keep the default matching by age plus or minus 6 months. You can do grade and gender match if you want. And then you're going to find the matched samples. So there's 44. And then the third step is to select the method used to equate the samples by length. So how are we going to match this by length with our sample to the database samples? You can take the default, same number of total words. If there's other factors, you may want to do time or a certain number of utterances. But I'm going to take the default, and then that narrowed it down to 29 samples, which is still a good amount. You want about 20 samples or more for a comparison. So I've selected my samples, and now over on the right-hand side, the first speaker is going to be our target speaker. The standard deviation interval setting is defaulted to 1. Personally, I like to keep it at 1. What this is going to do is highlight measures based on how you set your standard deviation. So to me, if something is 1 standard deviation, that might be something interesting that I want to know about clinically. But if you want to, like districts might have your criteria for qualification at 1.75, you can certainly change that. And then measures that are 1.75 standard deviations away from the mean will be highlighted. All right, I'm going to click OK. And so I've selected my samples, and now I'm going to run the standard measures report. That's a good one to start with. It's under the overview section. And it's kind of a cover sheet of the language measures. So now we have one more prompt here, which is how we're going to base our report. So we have options to base it on the entire transcript, so all of it, start to finish. Sometimes that's appropriate for a closed task like a narrative where you have a really set structure. You can equate it by same number, or base the report on same number of words if you'd like, or measure driven. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two, meaning that SALT does all the work in the background, but if measures are based on occurrences, like number of errors or number of mazes, then SALT is going to cut those by total number of words. If it's the percentage, so percentage of words, then it's going to use the entire transcript. So I always just do measure driven, and we'll select OK there. And then what this is doing is calculating the measures in real time. So it's taking those specific samples that we designated for a comparison. So all of our third graders plus or minus 6 months, and calculating the stats. So it can take just a second, and then in a couple seconds, you'll have your information. Okay, and here's our standard measures report. Again, this is a good place to start. So let's just kind of go over how to interpret this. The left-hand side of the report is everything about your sample and your speaker. The right-hand side is everything about the database. So we've got our transcript information up here. We have Albany. She's a 9-1, and she's in 3rd grade, completing a porcupine named Fluffy. Okay, and then the right-hand side is the database. So we've got the samples that we selected and our standard deviation interval, and then the mean, min, max, and standard deviation for the database. Okay, so if we scroll down, this report is divided by language domain, so that can kind of make your analysis a little bit more simplified, kind of cue you into specific language domains that may be strengths or maybe relative challenges. So we've got transcript length, which kind of gives you a summary of the transcript, intelligibility, macro analysis if you completed the narrative scoring scheme that looks at the structure and content of the narrative. That score will be there. And then we have syntax and morphology, semantics, verbal facility, and then errors. So what my eye goes to is measures that are highlighted. So let's go ahead and look at her syntax and morphology section. I see one score is highlighted. So this is the SI composite score. So that's an additional analysis that was overlaid on top of this transcript that basically looks at syntactic complexity, how many clauses per utterance essentially. So this is a good example. Her Albany score was 1.44. And then if we look, that is 1.54 standard deviations above the mean. And our database mean was 1.27. So this is kind of the caution that you have to use and just think, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing to be above the average for complex sentences and using longer sentences? That seems like a relative strength. So that's not one that we'd be concerned about necessarily. So that's a relative strength for her. If we pop up here, everything else in that section is within the average range. Her mean length of utterance was 7.64%. Utterance with verbs was kind of right on par, and mean verbs per utterance. Okay, so that might be a strength for her, potentially. And then if we drop down to the semantics section, let's look at those numbers. Specifically, number of different words here is highlighted. So she had 114 different words. That's slightly below the database mean, so negative 1.14 standard deviations. The database mean was 123. The moving average number of different words was 48, and then the moving average type token ratio was 0.48. And what moving average does is it just kind of takes the average across the entire transcript. So it would get the number of average of number of different words if we take utterance 1 and then utterance 50. And then it would take the average from utterance 2 to 51. So it gives you a little bit more reliability on those measures. So maybe semantics might be an area of vocabulary. It might be a relative challenge for Albany. And if we come down here, verbal facility. So this is kind of that cohesion, the fluency piece, not stuttering necessarily, but are they having difficulties with formulating sentences, pauses, revisions, and so forth? So her rate of speech words per minute was average. Pause time as percent of total time was average. But then look at the maze words as percent of total words was 30.5%. So that's significant. If you think of 30% of all of her total words were spent in a maze being those filled pauses, a revision, repetition, kind of those false starts, that may indicate that there's some difficulty there that we want to dig a little deeper. I'm going to point out now, if you have any questions on what these measures mean, when you are in reports and SALT, you just hit this help menu, and then let's see if I can drag this out. And this will give you all the definitions and how it's calculated, for example. So say you weren't exactly sure what the moving average of number of total words is. So a moving window, for example, gives you the definition and then how it's calculated. So if ever you're in question, just hit that help menu, and that can be great information on figuring out what a measure is, because there's lots of measures in these reports. Okay, so that's her standard measures report. So again, that's a good springboard. Let's go back up to the database, and let's just go through. I'm going to go through the overview. There's a couple things that are really nice clinically. The first one that I'll show you is the quick look, and I'm just going to go ahead and take the default. And what this is a report that has no statistics on it. It's just a strength within normal limits or a weakness. So this is very like evaluation meeting friendly, very parent teacher friendly. So you can take this into meetings, and it's just got a check mark. So that can be something that you can share. Very readable and quick and dirty kind of report. That's just a great resource for meetings. And then also the performance report. What this is going to do is it's going to take all of this information, all of these statistics, and put it in a narrative that you can literally just copy and paste into your diagnostic report. So you can put in an IEP online, for example. So you have some options to edit the name, so Albany, and then the gender that you want to select. hit OK, and then here's your report within 2 seconds. Everything that you are running here is written up and ready to go. And keep in mind this is editable, so you might want to add like a subjective section. Albany was easily able to complete this task, for example. So you can type in that and edit it as you see fit, and then literally copy and paste. So that will save you a ton of time when it comes time to write up your results. Okay, and then also we have the goal bank that I'll show you. Again, we're going to select Albany for her name. And what this is it's going to take measures that were not within the normal limit range and then draft a goal. So of course you're not going to give a student, 7 language goals here, but it really directs you as far as areas of deficit that you could think about for potential therapy targets. Always use clinical judgment and make sure that these make sense. But this is here, and then if you look down here, as these are written, so it might be something, we work a lot on narratives in therapy. So given a story, retail opportunity, Albany will decrease revisions, repetitions, and false starts from 30%. So that was her baseline, that was her number. And then the 2 number here is going to be a measure number that would get her within the normal limit range, if that makes sense. So that's where the from and the 2 are derived from. Measures that are just count-based, we have the goals a little bit more vague because if it's a count-based, it's hard to say what a good count is. But it would, so this was based on reports that she wasn't really using plural bound morphemes in sentences, as well as database peers. So that would direct you to a potential goal. Okay, so that's the overview section. So that might be as far as you want to go with your analysis. If you have other things to get onto, that's certainly a good enough analysis, and it will give you a lot of information for your reports. If you did want to dig a little bit deeper, if you go off of those measures from the standardized report, the standard measures report, we recall that semantics and kind of that verbal facility were an area of relative challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the verbal facility summary. Again, the menu is organized by language domain. Take the default there. Okay, and then this is an additional report. So again, tons of information here, but have your eye track those gray highlighted areas, and this might kind of cue us into kind of what's going on with her. So the rate, as we noted, was within normal limits. Her pause summary looks pretty good. She had a few more number of pauses. I might not be overly concerned about that, but kind of thinking back to that maze words, she had 30%. So can we figure out why she is mazing? What's the kind of the root cause, or can we break it down? So if we go down here, it gives us all the information we need to kind of look at her mazes. I like this bottom part here because it breaks it down. So revisions are when they are kind of starting and then they switch and change to something totally different as far as their words. Repetitions, of course, they're repeating. Filled pauses are the uhs, ers, examples that we all kind of use. So if we look at her, you kind of look for patterns. So part word revision, not so many. Word revisions, she has 7. Phrase level revisions, she's got 14. So that's quite a few. And then if we go to repetitions, where she's kind of repeating herself, part word, not very many. She's got 9 word level repetitions and 20 phrase level repetitions. So again, that's kind of popping. And then the filled pauses. So to me, I might kind of go back and think, okay, is that demonstrating difficulty of utterance formulation, kind of getting her thoughts organized, organizing her sentences, and then generating the sentences. So that might kind of guide me towards what I would want to work on clinically with Albany. Okay, so that was kind of a quick summary about how to run an analysis using the SALT database. Thanks for watching.